It was 11:47 p.m. when I realized something was wrong. By 3:15 in the morning, I understood that wrong didn't even begin to cover it. My name is Dale Metzger. I'm 53 years old. I've been driving long haul for 28 years, cross-country routes mostly, Chicago to Denver, Dallas to Minneapolis, the kind of runs that take you through the empty parts of America, the parts most people fly over and never think about. I've seen things on those roads. Accidents that would turn your stomach, weather that would make a sailor pray. The kind of loneliness that seeps into your bones and makes you question every choice that led you to this life. But I'd never seen anything I couldn't explain. Not until October 19th, 2024. I know every truck stop between Omaha and Wichita, every way station, every diner that's still open after midnight, every stretch of highway where the cell service dies, and you're completely alone with nothing but the road and your thoughts. I thought I knew those roads. I was wrong. I was running a load of agricultural equipment from Kansas City to a dealership in McCook, Nebraska. Routine job. 8 hours on I-70 west, then north on 283 through the Kansas farmland before crossing into Nebraska. Easy money. I'd done that exact route maybe 100 times over the years. Could probably drive it blindfolded. Which is probably why I wasn't paying attention when the GPS started acting up around 9:30. The screen flickered, froze, showed me on a road that didn't exist. I figured it was a glitch, satellite interference, solar flares, whatever. The GPS units in these older trucks aren't exactly cutting-edge technology. Mine was probably manufactured when flip phones were still cool. I pulled out my phone to use Google Maps instead. No signal. Not weak signal. No signal. That gray area in the corner where the bars should be. Annoying, but not alarming. There are plenty of dead zones in rural Kansas. Miles and miles where the only company you've got is AM radio static and the sound of your own engine. So I did what any experienced trucker would do. I kept driving, trusted my internal compass, figured I'd pick up signal again in 20 minutes when I got closer to the next town. I've driven without GPS before. Done it plenty of times. You learn to read the road, learn to trust the signs, learn to feel your way through the darkness when technology fails. But something was different that night. The stars were wrong. I know that sounds crazy. Stars don't move, don't change. The constellations have been the same for thousands of years. But that night, when I looked up through my windshield, the patterns weren't right. Orion was in the wrong place. The Big Dipper was tilted at an angle I'd never seen before, like someone had shuffled the sky and put it back together slightly off. I told myself it was the angle, the curvature of the windshield, the fatigue playing tricks on my eyes. But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong with the world that night, and I was driving right into the center of it. But here's the thing. The next town never came. I should explain something about driving through Kansas at night. It's flat. Impossibly, endlessly flat. The kind of flat that makes you understand why people used to believe the Earth was the center of the universe. Because out there, it feels like you're the only thing that exists. Just you and the road and the infinite black sky pressing down from above. There are landmarks, though. Grain elevators, water towers, the occasional cluster of lights marking a small town or a farm. You learn to navigate by them even when technology fails. That night, there were no landmarks, just darkness. I drove for an hour, then 2. My fuel gauge started dropping in ways that didn't make sense. I'd filled up in Kansas City. Should have had enough to make it to McCook with plenty to spare, but the needle kept falling and the road kept going. And I started to realize I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. Not a single car, not a single truck, nothing. Just empty asphalt stretching into nothing. That's when I noticed the sign. It came out of nowhere. 1 second, nothing but darkness. The next, my headlights were illuminating a green highway sign, weathered and slightly rusted. Halcyon, 3 miles. I didn't recognize the name. Now, I know Kansas. I know every town on that route, every wide spot in the road, every collection of grain silos and gas stations that barely qualifies as a municipality. There is no Halcyon. I've checked since. Looked at every map, every database, every historical record I could find. I searched the Kansas State Historical Society archives, dug through census records going back to the 1800s, contacted local historians who specialize in ghost towns and forgotten communities. Nothing. Not a single reference, not a single mention, not even a footnote in some obscure academic paper about lost settlements of the Great Plains. Halcyon, Kansas does not exist, has never existed, was never founded, never populated, never abandoned. As far as official records are concerned, that stretch of highway has always been empty. Just prairie, just darkness, just the endless flat nothing of rural Kansas. But that night, I drove right into it. The town appeared all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. One moment, empty prairie. The next, I was driving down a main street lined with brick buildings, a hardware store, a diner, a bank with columns out front, a church with a white steeple at the far end. All of it lit, not brightly, not the harsh fluorescent glow of modern streetlights, something softer, warmer. The kind of amber light you see in old photographs from the 50s. And there were people, walking on the sidewalks, sitting in the diner, standing in clusters outside what looked like a movie theater. At 11:47 at night, on a random Wednesday in October, in a town that doesn't exist. I slowed down, couldn't help it. The sight was so impossible, so completely wrong, that my foot came off the gas all on its own. My headlights caught the faces of people walking past. A man in a gray suit and fedora, a woman in a polka dot dress pushing a shopping cart, two teenagers holding hands, their saddle shoes clicking on the sidewalk in perfect sync. All of them young, all of them healthy, all of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a time capsule, and all of them turning to look at me as I passed. With that smile, that same wrong smile. I've seen a lot of things on the road, accidents that would haunt your nightmares, weather that could kill you in minutes, people so desperate they'd do anything for a ride, but I'd never seen anything that made my blood run cold the way those smiles did. Because there was nothing behind them, no warmth, no friendliness, no human emotion at all, just teeth, just muscle and bone arranged in the shape of something that was supposed to mean happiness, but meant something else entirely. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. My fuel gauge was flashing. The low fuel warning had been beeping for the last 20 minutes, and there, on the corner of Main and what a faded sign called Prosperity Avenue, was a gas station. Old style, the kind with the rounded pumps in the attendant booth, the kind they tore down everywhere else in the 80s. I should have kept driving, I know that now. Should have put my foot on the gas and blown through that main street without looking back. But I needed fuel. Or I thought I did. So I pulled in, killed the engine, sat there for a long moment trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The attendant was already walking toward me. Young guy, maybe 25, clean white shirt, black bow tie, hair slicked back in a style nobody's worn since my father was my age. He smiled, and I swear to God, his smile was wrong, not menacing, not threatening, just wrong. Like he'd learned how to smile from a picture but had never actually felt the emotion that was supposed to go with it. Evening, friend. Fill her up? His voice was normal, pleasant even, but there was something underneath it, something that made my skin crawl. Yeah, I heard myself say. Yeah, fill it up. He nodded, still smiling, and walked toward the back of my truck. That's when I noticed the calendar in the station window, October 19th, 1957. I told myself it was a novelty calendar, a decoration, some kind of retro theme the station was running with. Explain the old pumps, the bow tie, all of it. But then I looked around, really looked. The cars parked along Main Street weren't classics being driven by collectors. They were Chevrolets and Fords from the 50s, sure. But they weren't restored. They weren't polished and pampered the way classic cars always are. They were just cars, with rust spots, with dents, with dust on the windshields and groceries visible through the back windows. Cars being used every day by people who thought they were normal, and the people The people walking past my truck glancing up at me with that same wrong smile. Their clothes weren't costumes, weren't vintage finds from thrift stores. They were worn, faded, the kind of clothes you wear when you don't know any other kind exists. I watched a woman push a baby carriage past the gas station. She was wearing a dress I'd seen in my grandmother's old photo albums. Same pattern, same cut, same everything. And when she looked at me, when our eyes met through my windshield, she didn't react to my modern truck. Didn't seem to notice that my 18-wheeler was 67 years more advanced than anything else on that street. She just smiled, that same wrong smile, and kept walking. I should have left then, obviously. But then I noticed something else. The diner across the street. Through the window I could see people sitting at the counter, eating pie, drinking coffee, having conversations that looked normal from a distance. But nobody was moving right. Their gestures were too smooth, too synchronized, like they were all following the same choreography. The woman lifting her coffee cup at the exact same moment the man next to her raised his fork. The teenager at the end of the counter turning to look at the window at precisely the instant everyone else did. And they were all looking at me. Every single person in that diner, faces pressed against the glass, smiling. The attendant knocked on my window. "All done, friend. That'll be $2.37. I stared at him. $2.37 for a full tank of diesel. "You okay there?" He leaned closer, still smiling. "You look a little pale. Long night on the road?" "What year is it?" I asked. The words came out before I could stop them. His smile flickered, just for a second, a microsecond, but I saw it. Something else underneath, something that wasn't human, something old and patient and terribly, terribly hungry. Then the smile was back, brighter than before. 1957, friend. Same as it's always been. Same as it always will be. I don't remember paying. Don't remember pulling out of that station. Don't remember the drive through town, past the diner and the hardware store and the church with its white steeple. But I remember what I saw as I drove. People on the sidewalks turning to watch me pass, all of them smiling, all of them waving, like I was a parade float and they were the crowd. Except parades have music, have noise, have life. This had nothing. Just silence. Just smiles. Just empty eyes tracking my truck as it crawled down Main Street. I remember seeing a barbershop with 3 men sitting in chairs, getting haircuts from barbers who weren't moving their scissors. Just standing there, smiling, holding their tools at the ready like they were waiting for a signal that never came. I remember seeing a school bus parked outside a building that might have been a school. Children visible through the windows, sitting in perfect rows, facing forward, not fidgeting, not talking, just waiting. I remember seeing the church doors open as I passed. A congregation standing in the pews, all turned toward me, all smiling. And I remember the priest at the pulpit. He was giving a sermon, but his mouth wasn't moving. The words were coming from everywhere, from the walls, from the ground, from inside my own head. "Welcome to Halcyon, friend. We've been waiting for you. Same as we've always been waiting. Same as we always will be." I floored the gas. I just remember the silence. The complete and total absence of sound from the moment I left that gas station until the moment Halcyon disappeared in my rearview mirror. And then, sound came rushing back. The rumble of my engine, the crackle of the radio finding a station, the beep of my phone reconnecting to a cell tower. I pulled over, hands shaking, checked my phone. 3:17 in the morning. I'd been in that town for over 3 hours, but it had felt like maybe 20 minutes, 30 at most. Time had moved wrong in Halcyon, stretched and compressed and folded in on itself like something was feeding on the minutes, taking them, storing them somewhere I couldn't see. And my fuel gauge, full, completely full, like I'd just filled up, except I checked my wallet, I checked my receipts, I checked everything. I never paid anyone anything. And here's the thing that really keeps me up at night. The tank was full of fuel, but it wasn't diesel. It was something else. I noticed it the next morning when I stopped to refuel again. The pump wouldn't take. The nozzle wouldn't fit right. And when I checked my tank, when I popped the cap and looked inside, the fuel was the wrong color. Not the brown gold of diesel, something darker, thicker, like oil that had been sitting in the earth for 1,000,000 years. And it smelled, God, it smelled like nothing I'd ever encountered before. Sweet, rotten, like time itself had been distilled into liquid form. I had the tank drained and flushed, told the mechanic I must have gotten contaminated fuel somewhere. He didn't ask questions, but he looked at me strange when he saw what came out of that tank, and he never touched my truck again. Said it felt wrong. Said there was something in the engine that wasn't supposed to be there. I traded that truck in a month later. The new owner called me 3 weeks after that. Wanted to know why the radio kept picking up stations that didn't exist. Stations playing music from the 1950s. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. I hung up. I never answered when he called again. Sometimes I wonder what he found, what he heard coming through those speakers, whether the stations ever stopped playing, whether the music ever got louder, whether he ever looked in his rearview mirror and saw something sitting in the back seat, something that had been waiting, something that had hitched a ride out of Halcyon. I try not to think about it too much, but late at night, when the radio in my new truck picks up static, I change the channel, fast, before I can hear what's hiding underneath the noise. I looked up Halcyon when I got home, searched every database, every historical archive, every collection of ghost town records the internet has to offer. Nothing. No Halcyon in Kansas, no Halcyon in Nebraska, no Halcyon anywhere in the Midwest that matched what I'd seen. But I did find something else. A forum post. Old. From 2003. Some trucker sharing a story almost identical to mine. Same stretch of highway, same impossible town appearing out of nowhere. Same people with their wrong smiles and their 50s clothes, and their complete inability to recognize that anything was out of place. He said he'd gone back, driven that same route a week later looking for the town. Found nothing, just empty prairie. Just the road stretching into darkness, just the flat nothing of Kansas farmland with no sign that anything had ever been there. He drove that same stretch of highway over and over, looking for the sign, looking for the town, looking for any evidence that what he'd experienced was real. He searched for hours, drove back and forth along that stretch of highway, checked every side road, every turnoff, every dirt path that might have led somewhere unexpected. Nothing. But here's the part that still haunts me. He said he went back again, a year later. Same date, same time. And Halcyon was there, waiting like it had never left, like it was always there, but only visible to certain people, at certain times, under certain conditions. The post had replies, not many, just 3, all from other truckers who claimed to have had similar experiences. One guy said he'd seen Halcyon in 1978, pulled over to use a phone booth. Remember phone booths? And called his dispatcher to report he'd be late. The dispatcher told him there was no town called Halcyon anywhere on his route. When he looked up from the phone booth, the town was gone. He was standing in an empty field. The phone booth was a rusted shell that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Another poster said his grandfather had talked about Halcyon, said it was a real town once, before the war, before something happened that nobody wanted to discuss. His grandfather had driven through once in the early 50s and came back different, quieter, older somehow, like years had been taken from him in a single night. The third reply was just one sentence. If you see Halcyon, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. I wish I'd read that before I pulled into that gas station. That forum post was his last. His profile shows no activity after 2003. I tried to find him, searched his username, his trucking company. Every trace he'd left online, nothing. It's like he disappeared. Or maybe he didn't disappear at all. Maybe he's still there, in Halcyon, smiling that wrong smile, walking those impossible streets, Trapped in 1957 forever. I did some more digging after that. Found other forum posts, other stories, other accounts of people who'd encountered towns that shouldn't exist in rural Kansas and Nebraska and Oklahoma and Iowa. The internet is full of them if you know where to look. Hidden in corners of message boards, buried in comment sections, whispered about in trucker forums and long-haul driving communities. The details varied, different names, different years, different specific horrors. But the pattern was always the same. Technology failing, time moving wrong, people with expressions that didn't match what they were feeling, a sense that reality itself had become unstable. And the same advice, repeated over and over: if you see it, don't stop. If you stop, don't get out. If you get out, don't stay. And if you stay too long, you won't leave at all. One post I found was from a woman who claimed her grandmother had grown up in a town like Halcyon. Said her grandmother would get this look in her eyes sometimes, this distant, empty look. And she'd say things that didn't make sense. Things like, "It's still October 19th, and they're all still waiting, and the smile never stops." Her grandmother died in 2008, peacefully, in her sleep, at a nursing home in Topeka. But the woman said sometimes, late at night, she still sees her grandmother standing in the corner of her bedroom, not moving, not speaking, just standing there, smiling, just smiling, that same wrong smile. I don't know if that story is true. I don't know if any of these stories are true, but I know what I experienced. I know what I saw. And I know that somewhere in rural Kansas, there's a town that shouldn't exist, full of people who shouldn't be alive, waiting for someone new to wander in. I still drive that route. Have to. It's part of my territory, part of how I make my living, part of who I am. But I never drive it at night anymore. Never let my fuel gauge drop below half. Never, ever ignore my GPS when it starts acting strange. I've learned to pay attention to the warning signs, the little things that tell you something's wrong before your brain catches up to what your gut already knows. A flicker on the screen, a dead spot in the signal, a stretch of road that feels longer than it should. Those are the moments when you turn around, when you find another route, when you do whatever it takes to avoid ending up somewhere you shouldn't be. And every time I pass through that stretch of Kansas, that empty, endless, impossibly flat stretch of highway, I keep my eyes on the road. I don't look for signs. And I try not to think about what's waiting out there in the darkness. A town that shouldn't exist. A year that never ended. And a smile I'll see in my nightmares for the rest of my life. One more thing. Last month, I was filling up at a truck stop in Salina. Regular place, modern pumps, credit card readers, all the things that prove you're in the right century. And I saw a driver I recognized. Old guy. Maybe 70, leaning against a Peterbilt that looked like it had seen better days. He was wearing a white shirt and a black bow tie. And when he looked at me, he smiled, that same wrong smile. I got in my truck and drove away so fast I almost sideswiped a fuel pump. Didn't stop until I was 3 states away. Didn't sleep for 2 days. Didn't eat. Didn't talk to anyone. Just kept driving. Like if I put enough miles between myself and Kansas, the memory would fade. The fear would diminish. The wrong smiles would stop appearing every time I closed my eyes. But they didn't. They never did. Even now, months later, I still see them, still dream about them, still wake up in the middle of the night convinced that someone is standing in my bedroom doorway, smiling, waiting. And every time I close my eyes, every time the darkness gets a little too thick and the road gets a little too empty, I see that smile. And I wonder how long I have before Halcyon finds me again, before it decides I've been running long enough, before October 19th comes around and I feel that pull in my chest, that irresistible gravity, drawing me back to a town that shouldn't exist, to a year that never ended, to a future I'm not sure I still have. I've talked to other truckers since, quietly, carefully. The kind of conversations you have at 3 in the morning at rest stops when the coffee is weak and the night is long and nobody's really paying attention. I've found others who've seen Halcyon, not many, maybe half a dozen over the past year. but enough to know I'm not crazy, enough to know it's real. They all tell the same story. Empty highway, failing GPS, town that shouldn't exist, people with wrong smiles, time that moves in ways it shouldn't, and they all say the same thing when I ask if they've ever gone back. Number, never. Not for anything. One guy told me his brother went back, wanted to prove it was real, wanted to find evidence, take pictures, document what he'd seen. He found the town. He didn't find his way out. That was 6 years ago. His brother's still listed as missing. My wife asks me sometimes why I refuse to drive at night, why I always check in, always text her my route, always tell her exactly where I'm going to be and when. I tell her it's just being careful. I don't tell her the truth. I don't tell her that somewhere in Kansas there's a town waiting for me. A town where it's always October 19th, 1957. A town where the smiles are wrong and the time runs backward, and the people never age because they have already lost everything that made them human. I don't tell her that one day, one night. I might not come home. And if that happens, if I disappear on some empty stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, she should know that I didn't run off, didn't abandon her, didn't choose to leave. I just drove into Halcyon, and this time, I didn't drive out. And there's one more thing I need to tell you. About a month ago, I got a letter, not email, not a text, an actual physical letter, handwritten, on paper that smelled like dust and old ink and something else I couldn't quite identify. No return address, no postmark, just my name and my home address in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it. Inside was a photograph, black and white, faded at the edges, the kind of photograph that comes out of those old instant cameras they used to have in the 50s. It showed Main Street, Halcyon, the diner, the hardware store, the bank with columns, the church with the white steeple, and in the center of the street, standing exactly where my truck would have been that night, there was a figure, a man, wearing a trucker's cap and a flannel shirt and standing next to an 18-wheeler that shouldn't have been there. That couldn't have been there, because that photograph was taken in 1957, and the man in the picture, the man with his back to the camera, was wearing my clothes. My exact clothes, the ones I was wearing the night I drove through Halcyon. I burned that photograph, just like Denise burned her postcards. But sometimes I wonder, did I really escape that night? Or am I still there, still standing in that street, still waiting for someone to tell me it's time to go home? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to find out. It was 2:23 in the afternoon when I knocked on Harold Mercer's door. By sunset, I understood why nobody in Elkwood had spoken his name in 30 years. My name is Denise Callahan. I'm 44 years old. I've been a probation officer for Douglas County, Kansas for 16 years. Mostly juvenile cases these days, but I started out in adult supervision. The hard cases. The ones nobody else wanted. The ones that took me to places most people never see. Meth houses and trailer parks. Halfway homes in bad neighborhoods. Rural properties where the nearest neighbor was 5 miles away and help was even further. I've done home visits in crack houses. I've interviewed sex offenders in trailer parks so remote you can't get a tow truck out there. I've walked into situations that would make most people lock their doors and call the police. I've been threatened. I've been cursed at. I've had guns waved in my face by people who were high enough to forget what consequences meant. But I've never been afraid. Not really. I've learned to manage fear, compartmentalize it, put it in a box in my mind and only open that box when I need the adrenaline to get me through a dangerous situation. That's what training does for you. That's what experience teaches you. But not until April of 2024, not until Elkwood, because what I experienced there, what I felt in that farmhouse, that wasn't the kind of fear you can manage. That wasn't the kind of fear you can put in a box. That was something older, something deeper, something that lives in the primitive part of your brain that remembers what it was like when humans weren't at the top of the food chain. That was the fear of prey. And once you've felt that, once you've understood on a cellular level that something out there sees you as food, you never really stop being afraid. The case file landed on my desk in early March. Harold Mercer, 67 years old, convicted in 1994 for, honestly, the file was a mess, some kind of fraud charge that had been plea bargained down from something else. The original charges were sealed. The judge's notes were missing. Half the paperwork looked like it had been through a shredder and taped back together by someone with trembling hands. But the basics were clear. He'd served 5 years, been released in '99, completed parole in 2004, no violations, no incidents, no contact with the justice system for 20 years. And now, somehow he was back on my caseload. Clerical error, probably. The system flags people sometimes for no reason, generates paperwork that shouldn't exist. I figured I'd do a quick home visit, verify he was still alive and staying out of trouble, then close the file and move on. Simple, routine, nothing to worry about. I should have paid more attention to the fact that 3 other probation officers had been assigned this case before me, and all 3 had transferred out of the department within a month. No explanations, no forwarding addresses, just gone. I found one of their notes in the file, handwritten, barely legible, like the person who wrote it was shaking too hard to hold the pen steady. Don't go to Elkwood, don't talk to Mercer, don't ask about 1957. I thought it was a joke, some kind of hazing ritual for the new transfer. I should have listened. Elkwood isn't really a town. It's more like a memory of a town, a collection of buildings that used to be something and are now just waiting to fall down. Population 47, according to the last census, though I'd be surprised if there were even half that many people actually living there when I visited. It's about an hour southeast of Lawrence, deep into the Kansas prairie, the kind of place where the road turns to gravel without warning and the GPS loses confidence in its own directions. The drive was strange, not wrong exactly, just off. The way a dream is off, the way a memory is off when you haven't thought about it in years and the details have started to blur. I passed farmhouses that seemed too far apart, fields that stretched longer than they should have, a horizon that never got closer no matter how fast I drove. And there were no other cars, not one, for the entire hour. On a Thursday afternoon, in the middle of Kansas, I should have noticed, should have paid attention. But I was focused on the job, focused on the file, focused on getting in and getting out so I could go home and forget I'd ever heard the name Harold Mercer. I found Mercer's address without too much trouble. A farmhouse at the end of a long dirt driveway, 2 stories, white paint peeling, a porch that sagged in the middle like a tired smile. The house looked like it had been waiting, not abandoned, not forgotten, just waiting, like it knew someone was coming. Like it had been standing there at the end of that driveway for 67 years, patient and still, counting the seconds until the next visitor arrived. And a barn behind it, red, faded, leaning slightly to the left like it was listening for something. I parked my state vehicle by the porch, grabbed my clipboard, checked my phone. No signal, of course. I made a mental note to mention that in my report. Officers conducting rural home visits should always have satellite communicators, should always tell someone exactly where they're going, should always have a backup plan if technology fails. I didn't have any of those things. I thought I didn't need them. The door opened before I could knock. Harold Mercer was not what I expected. The file said 67. The man in the doorway looked older, much older, skin like paper stretched over bone, eyes that were the wrong shade of blue, hair that was white and thin and combed straight back in a style that reminded me of old photographs. Photographs from a long time ago. Miss Callahan, he said. Not a question, a statement, like he'd been expecting me. Mr. Mercer, I'm here for your scheduled home visit. He smiled, and I felt something cold crawl down my spine. It was the same smile I'd seen on... No, that's not possible. I hadn't seen this man before, had never met him, had no reason to feel like I'd encountered that exact expression somewhere else. But I had. I knew I had. Come in, he said. I've been waiting for you. The inside of the house was wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. It was clean, organized, nothing out of place, Nothing that would raise flags on a standard home visit. But the furniture was old, not antique store old. Old like it had been sitting in the same positions for decades. Old like nobody had moved it since the house was built. And the photographs on the walls, they were all of Elkwood, the town, the main street, the buildings I'd driven past on my way here. But different, newer, like they'd been taken when the town was still alive, when the storefronts still had glass in their windows, when the sidewalks were still crowded with people going about their days. And in every single photograph, there was a figure, standing at the edge of the frame, face turned away from the camera, just a shape, a silhouette, a presence that shouldn't have been there. "You noticed them," Mercer said. I spun around. He was standing too close, hadn't heard him move, hadn't heard the floorboards creak or the air shift or any of the sounds that should accompany a person walking across a room. "The photographs. You noticed the photographs." "Who is that?" I pointed at the figure in the nearest frame. "In the background. The same person appears in all of them." I looked closer. The figure wasn't just in one photograph. It was in all of them, every single one, standing at the edge of the frame, never in focus, never quite clear, but always there. And as I scanned from photo to photo, I noticed something else. The figure was getting closer. In the oldest photographs, the ones that looked like they'd been taken in the 40s or early 50s, it was barely visible. Just a smudge on the horizon, a shadow that could have been anything. But in the newer ones, the ones from 56, 57, it was standing right behind the people posing for the camera, close enough to touch, and they didn't seem to notice. "Not a person," he said, "not anymore." I should have left. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that house, to get in my car and drive away and never look back. My training was telling me this wasn't a safe situation, that something was wrong with this interview, that I needed to extract myself and return with backup and proper support. But I didn't, because Harold Mercer started talking. And what he told me explained everything and nothing. "Elkwood used to be a real town," he said. We were sitting in his living room, him in an ancient armchair, me on a couch that smelled like dust and old memories. The room was cold, not uncomfortable cold, but wrong cold, like the temperature had nothing to do with the weather outside, and the light coming through the windows, it was too amber, too soft, like we were sitting inside one of those old photographs on the wall, like 1957 was leaking through the cracks. 1,500 people at its peak, 1953. We had a bank, a school, 3 churches, a movie theater that showed double features every Saturday night. He stared at the photographs on the wall. "I grew up here, knew everyone, every family, every face, every story." He paused. "I was 23 in 1957, had a job at the bank, had a girl I was going to marry, had plans, dreams, all the things young people are supposed to have." His hands were shaking. "I was supposed to have a life, Miss Callahan. Kids, grandkids, a career, a retirement, all of it. Everything that makes being human worth the trouble." He looked at me. "Instead, I got this. 67 years of watching the world change through windows that don't quite belong in this reality. 67 years of aging without growing, 67 years of remembering what it felt like to have a future, while mine was devoured by something I still don't understand." What happened? 1957. The year hit me like a punch. I don't know why. It was just a number, just a date. But something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. What happened in 1957? He turned to look at me, and his eyes were wrong. The blue was too bright, too deep, like looking into water that went down forever. Something came through. He told me about the night, October 19th, 1957, a night when time stopped working right. "It started with the clocks," he said. "Every clock in town stopped at the same moment, 11:47 p.m. The grandfather clocks, the wristwatches, the clock on the bank tower, all of them. Frozen. He was staring at the wall, but I don't think he was seeing the photographs anymore. Then the lights went out. Not a power failure, something else. Like the darkness was alive, like it was seeping in through the cracks in the windows and the spaces under the doors. What did people do? At first? Nothing. People went to bed. Thought it was just a blackout. Figured the power would come back in the morning. He paused, but morning didn't come. When the sun set and didn't rise for 3 days, when the people of Elkwood walked out of their houses one by one and gathered in the town square with smiles on their faces that didn't match anything they were feeling inside. When something that wasn't from here, something that had slipped through a crack in the world, fed on them. It came from somewhere else, Mercer said. Somewhere that exists between moments, between seconds. A place where time doesn't move the way it does here. What did it look like? You've seen the photographs, the figure in the background. I thought about those images, the shape that got closer and closer with each successive year. That's what it looked like before, when it was still learning, still figuring out how to exist in our world. And now? Now it doesn't look like anything. Now it is this place. It's become the town, the buildings, the streets, the people. Everything you see when you look at Elkwood. That's what it looks like now. I felt sick. You're saying the whole town is alive, hungry, waiting? Yes. He nodded slowly. We're not its prisoners, Miss Callahan. We're its bait. Not their bodies, their time, their years, their futures. It took everything, Mercer said. Every moment we would have lived, every birthday, every anniversary, every morning cup of coffee and every evening sunset. It ate it all. And when it was done, when it had taken every future second from every person in Elkwood, he paused. It kept us. What do you mean, kept? I mean, we're still here, all of us, everyone who was in Elkwood that night. We're still walking these streets, still living in these houses, still going through the motions of being human. He gestured toward the window. There are 47 people left. That's what the census says. But there used to be 1,500. The rest, they're gone. Not dead. Just gone. They walked into the darkness during those 3 days when the sun wouldn't rise. They followed the thing that came through. They went somewhere else. And you stayed. I didn't have a choice. Some of us got taken. Some of us got left behind. I don't know what determines which is which. I just know that when the sun finally rose on the 4th day, there were only a few of us left, wandering through empty streets, wondering what happened, wondering if we were the lucky ones or the damned ones. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Turns out we were both. You're saying you're from 1957? I didn't believe him. Couldn't believe him. But I also couldn't explain the photographs, couldn't explain the house, couldn't explain the way my phone had stopped working the moment I'd crossed into Elkwood's limits. I'm saying I never left, he said. None of us did. We just keep going, day after day, year after year, trapped in a moment that never ends. But you aged. You were convicted in 94. You served time. That's not the thing that came through. It doesn't keep you frozen, not like that. It keeps you alive, keeps you walking, keeps you smiling. He demonstrated that same wrong smile. But it takes your future, so you age, you grow old, you just never move forward, never change, never become anything other than what you were the moment it touched you. That's impossible, is it? He stood up, walked to the window. Look outside, Miss Callahan. Tell me what you see. I looked. The sun was setting. Except I'd arrived at 2:23 in the afternoon. We'd been talking for maybe 30 minutes, 40 at most, and the sun was setting, like hours had passed in moments, like time was moving wrong, like something was feeding on the minutes. That's what it does, Mercer said, like he could read my mind. It eats time, yours, mine, everyone's. It's always hungry, always feeding, and once it notices you, once it knows you're there, he trailed off. What? It never stops watching, never stops waiting. It knows you now, Miss Callahan. It knows your face, your name, your future. My future. That's what it wants. That's what it always wants. The moments you haven't lived yet, the days you haven't seen. It takes them, stores them, feeds on them. And when it's taken enough, when there's nothing left of your tomorrow, he smiled. That wrong smile. The same smile I'd been seeing all afternoon. The same smile I'd noticed on the photographs. The same smile that would haunt my dreams for months to come. You become like us. What does that mean exactly? Empty, patient, waiting, still able to think, still able to remember who you used to be, but unable to move forward, unable to grow, unable to become anything other than what you were the moment it touched you. That sounds like death. It's worse than death, he said. Death is an ending. This is nothing. No beginning, no ending, just existence, frozen in a single moment that stretches out forever and ever and ever. You need to leave, Mercer said. Now, before it gets dark. Why? What happens when it gets dark? The town comes back. He was at the door now, opening it, gesturing for me to go. Every night, same as it's always been. The buildings fill up, the lights come on, the people walk the streets and smile their smiles and wait for someone new to wander in. I was on the porch. Don't remember walking there. Don't remember my feet moving. But I was outside now. The sun was almost down. The sky was turning that deep purple orange that comes just before full dark. And I could feel something changing in the air around me. Like the world was holding its breath, like something was about to happen. Why are you warning me? I asked. If you're trapped, if you're part of this, why tell me to leave? He looked at me, and for just a moment, his eyes were normal, human, filled with 67 years of pain and regret and desperate, hopeless resignation. Because I'm still me, he said. Underneath, I'm still the person I was before it happened, and I remember what it felt like to have a future, to have tomorrow, to have hope. He started to close the door. Run, Miss Callahan, run and don't look back. And whatever you do, the door was almost shut now. His face was barely visible in the gap. Don't drive through Halcyon. What? Halcyon. It's the same thing, the same place, just wearing a different face. Elkwood during the day, Halcyon at night. Two names for one hunger, two doors into the same trap. How do you know about? Because I've been there too, because we're all connected. All the ones who got trapped in 1957. We're all part of the same thing now, the same moment, the same endless hungry moment. The door clicked shut, and I ran. I made it back to Lawrence by midnight. Don't remember the drive. Don't remember the roads. Don't remember anything except the desperate need to put as many miles as possible between myself and Elkwood. The whole way back, I kept thinking about what he'd said, about the thing that fed on futures, about the people who walked and smiled and never moved forward, about the town that came back every night, waiting for someone new. And I kept thinking about the fact that I hadn't told anyone where I was going, that nobody knew I'd driven out to Elkwood, that if something had happened, if I'd gotten trapped, nobody would have known where to look. I filed my report the next morning, closed Mercer's case, recommended no further supervision, noted that the subject appeared to be in stable condition and posed no risk to the community. Which was true, in a way. He wasn't a risk to the community. He was the community, or what was left of it. And I never, ever went back. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing I've never told anyone until now. When I got home that night, when I finally stopped shaking and sat down at my kitchen table and tried to process what had happened, I looked at my phone, at the metadata on the photos I'd taken during the drive, the automatic timestamps, the location tags. According to my phone, I'd never been to Elkwood. The photos showed me driving straight from Lawrence to nothing. A blank space on the map where Elkwood should have been, where I had been, and the timestamps. The timestamp showed I'd arrived at that blank space at 2:23 p.m. and left at 2:24. 1 minute. I'd been in that house for hours, talked to Mercer, watched the sunset, experienced an entire afternoon of impossible conversation, and according to my phone, it had lasted exactly 60 seconds. I called my supervisor the next day, tried to explain what had happened without sounding crazy. She told me I'd been gone for exactly the time my GPS showed, that I'd checked in when I arrived and checked out when I left, that there was nothing unusual about my visit. But I know what I experienced. I know how long I sat in that living room. I know how many words Mercer spoke. I know the sunset. I watched it. I felt the darkness pressing in. 60 seconds, that's all the time that passed in the real world. But I lived hours in Elkwood, hours that don't exist anymore, hours that were taken from me. I've looked up Elkwood since, found the same thing that Trucker found when he searched for Halcyon. Nothing. No record, no history, no evidence it ever existed. But I know it did. I know Harold Mercer is real. I know something happened in 1957 that broke time itself in a small patch of Kansas prairie. And I absolutely know, that if I ever drive that road again, Elkwood will be waiting. And this time, I might not get out. One last thing. 2 weeks after my visit, I got a postcard. No return address, no postmark. It just appeared in my mailbox like it had always been there. On the front, a photograph of a town square, brick buildings, a movie theater, a church with a white steeple, Halcyon, Kansas, a great place to stay. The photograph looked old, faded, like it had been printed decades ago and left in a drawer somewhere. But the paper was new, crisp, fresh, like it had been printed yesterday using ink that had been waiting since 1957, and on the back, in handwriting that looked like it had been traced over 1,000 times. We're still waiting for you, Denise. Same as it's always been. Same as it always will be. I burned that postcard, watched it curl and blacken in my kitchen sink, watched the words disappear into ash. But the next morning, when I went to make coffee, there was another one. Same picture, same words, same impossible handwriting. I burned that one too, and the next one, and the one after that. They kept coming for 3 weeks. Then they stopped. But sometimes, late at night when I close my eyes, I can still see those words, and I can still feel Elkwood pulling at me, waiting, patient, hungry for my future. I still work as a probation officer, still do home visits. But I've changed some things. I always tell someone where I'm going, always check in when I arrive, always have a satellite communicator in my pocket that works even when cell service doesn't. And I never, ever take cases in rural Kansas anymore. My supervisor thinks I'm being paranoid. Maybe I am. But I'd rather be paranoid than trapped in a town that doesn't exist, smiling a smile that doesn't mean anything, waiting for someone new to wander in so I can warn them the way Mercer warned me. Because that's what happens, I think. The ones who get trapped, they become part of the trap. They stand in doorways and tell strangers to run. And maybe once in a while, once in a great while, someone actually listens. Someone actually escapes. Someone actually makes it back to the real world with their future intact. But how many don't? How many people have wandered into Halcyon or Elkwood over the years? How many truckers have pulled into that gas station looking for fuel? How many travelers have stopped in that diner looking for coffee? How many people have knocked on farmhouse doors looking for directions? Hundreds? Thousands? More? I think about them sometimes. The ones who didn't get warned. The ones who didn't have a Harold Mercer to tell them to run. The ones who are still there, still smiling, still waiting. Still part of the trap. I looked up the other probation officers who had Mercer's case before me, the 3 who transferred out of the department. One moved to Florida, changed careers, became a real estate agent, never talks about her time in Kansas. One retired early, lives in Arizona now, posted on social media once that she doesn't travel anymore, doesn't go anywhere she hasn't been before, doesn't take chances on unknown roads. The third one. The third one disappeared in 2019. Her car was found on a rural highway in eastern Kansas. Engine running, fuel tank full, nobody inside. The investigation is still open. But I know what happened. I know where she went. And I know she's not coming back. Not as the person she was. Maybe as something else. Something with a wrong smile and empty eyes and a body that keeps moving even when there's nothing human left inside. I think about her sometimes. Wonder if she's walking the streets of Elkwood right now. Wonder if she's standing in doorways, warning strangers. Wonder if she remembers who she used to be. I hope she doesn't. I hope whatever the thing that lives in those towns does to people, I hope it takes the memories too. Because the alternative, remembering who you were while being trapped in what you've become, that would be worse than death. That would be forever. There's one more thing I should tell you. 3 months after my visit to Elkwood, I got a new case. Routine, nothing special. Just another parolee who'd failed to check in with his previous officer. I pulled the file, started reading, and stopped. Because the address was familiar. A farmhouse at the end of a long dirt driveway. 2 stories, white paint peeling, a porch that sagged in the middle like a tired smile. Different name, different conviction, different year. But the same house, the same town, the same coordinates on the map. I closed the file, marked it unable to locate, recommend case closure. And I never, ever opened it again. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really left. I know that sounds crazy. I'm sitting here in my apartment in Lawrence. I'm typing this on my laptop. I'm drinking coffee that's gone cold. Because I've been writing for hours without stopping. I'm real. I'm here. I'm in the present. But sometimes, late at night, when the shadows get long and the silence gets heavy, I feel it. That pull, that gravity. That sense that something is watching me from very far away. From 1957. From a town that doesn't exist. From a moment that never ended. And I wonder if what Mercer told me was true. That we're all connected now. All the ones who've seen those towns. All the ones who've experienced that wrongness. All the ones who escaped but left something behind. Part of our futures, part of our tomorrows, part of whatever makes us human. I feel different since that day. Older somehow. Like years have passed even though my calendar says it's only been months. Like something was taken from me that I can never get back. My doctor says I'm fine. My tests come back normal. But I know something changed. I know because I don't dream about the future anymore. I used to do that. Used to dream about retirement, about grandkids, about all the things I'd do when I finally stopped working. Now when I dream, I only dream about the past, about moments I've already lived, about futures I've already used up, like something fed on the tomorrow I was supposed to have, like something ate my hope. Maybe that's why I keep writing this down, keep trying to warn people, keep hoping that someone, somewhere, will read this and understand. Not because I think it will change anything, but because it's all I have left. A story, a warning, a testament to the fact that I was here, that I existed, that I had a future before something in the Kansas darkness tried to take it from me. And if you're reading this, if you've made it this far, please stay away from rural Kansas at night. Stay away from towns that don't appear on maps. Stay away from people who smile wrong and roads that go nowhere and clocks that show the wrong time. And if you ever find yourself driving through the endless flat darkness of the Great Plains, if your GPS starts acting strange, if your phone loses signal, if you see a sign for a town called Halcyon or Elkwood or any name that doesn't feel quite right, turn around, go back, and find another route. Because some places don't just trap your body, they trap your future. And once you've lost that, you're not really you anymore. You're just another smile, another pair of empty eyes, another voice saying, "Welcome, friend. We've been waiting for you." Same as it's always been, same as it always will be.